All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So today we are going to be kind of putting together and breaking down all of the changes that I experienced on the PTS for the Railjack Revisited update that we are going to be getting fairly soon here. Just to note, before we start talking about these changes, this is the public test server. So none of these changes are actually live in the game that everybody has access to. And this server is here for the purposes of getting feedback and making further changes before the release of the content to everyone. So please keep in mind that a lot of this video is just going to be my general feelings on the PTS at current, and hopefully some more changes come to the update before it actually goes out to everyone. With that, let's get started. I've broken this down into some different parts. We have Railjack changes, intrinsics, valence transferring, arc wings, kind of in general, and then my overall feelings on the state of the changes as they stand on the PTS at current before any further changes have happened. So let's just jump into this. First and foremost, we have the damage output of the Railjack in general. So I did multiple tests with this. That you can see in the stream that I put up. I did a just like bare bones, nothing on the Railjack test on Earth for the first mission to see how people are going to initially interact with Railjack and see the power level of things. And then I did a bunch of like high-end, maxed out, full avionics suites in the Veil to see how the combat is there, as I think those are probably the two most important ends of the spectrum, where we begin and where we end. So with that, I'm going to say that in general, this is a much improved version of Railjack because it just feels better to interact with enemies. Enemies die considerably quicker and don't feel nearly as much of a like bullet sponge as they do on the live build right now. With that, though, I think there is a specific discrepancy in progression. You have your starter Railjack where you have absolutely nothing equipped and you're just like buzzing around Earth, shooting enemies up. Feels really good. Kill times are fast. Good things are going on. But once you've applied all of the damage avionics and you have all your powers and all this other stuff that you're getting and applying to your Railjack and making it super tough, the kill time actually considerably goes up when you're in the Veil, which I feel like shouldn't be the case, and to me says that avionics are where the issue lies, because I think that just starting out Railjack feels really good now, but where we end up needs to be taken a bit higher. So in general, I feel like the avionics numbers are generally too low, and probably what would be best to kind of fix that stuff up would be taking the Hyperstrike avionic, which is just your general turret damage avionic, and taking it from, it's like 121% it sits at now, I believe, and like maybe shooting it up even all the way up to like 250% to really make it feel like you're getting like that actual large amount of progression from investing in the system and getting, you know, rewards for investing in the system. Well, just to make people feel like they actually gained something going from early missions to late missions. On top of that, I think it would also probably be appropriate to increase the numbers very slightly across the crit avionics, because they're a little low right now. And also, there's also the possibility that you could spread out the Hyperstrike buff and maybe not go to 250%, maybe go to like 210% or something, and then instead dole out some of those damage increases across more crit chance and more crit damage. I could definitely see them doing something like that as well to help patch up the damage to maybe the level that it needs to be once you are fully kitted out, because I think that they kind of nailed where it needs to be as a starter, but the end point is not quite where you'd probably want it. Along with that, the heat changes where they reduced the heat buildup of every single one of the weapons seems really good overall. The one thing that this majorly affects is that the Cryophon feels even worse now comparative to just like all the other weapons that I tried, because it was lowered from like 400 to 350 while everything else was cut in half. I really do think it would be appropriate to do kind of the same thing for the Cryophon and bring it down to like 200 heat buildup, just to give it kind of the same level of buff and keep it in line with some of the other weapons, because it's falling behind because it gets so fewer shots. Moving on, let's talk about some of these abilities. So Munitions Vortex, unfortunately in my dev stream breakdown, I very wrongly did not remember what this ability was because I was just conflating it with being a part of Void Hole. This ability is heavily nerfed, unfortunately. So you can no longer, as far as I could tell, shoot into the Munitions Vortex with your main cannons, which was, of course, kind of the point of Munitions Vortex previously. It is now stuck to the front of your Railjack, and because you can't shoot into it, it's very hard to build up any kind of damage on it in any meaningful way. Hopefully this doesn't get stuck to the front of your Railjack whenever it actually goes out on the full build, because I think Munitions Vortex, as it stands right now on live, is better than this change, and it definitely does not need to be changed in any way from what is on live at current. Void Hole. Void Hole obviously received a nerf and a buff where its pull, the suction to the center of it, is considerably stronger, and that feels really nice, but its duration was reduced from, I believe, 25 seconds down to 12 seconds. I really do think there's a middle point that would be much more appropriate for Void Hole, maybe somewhere in like the 16 to 20 second range. That would feel a little bit better, because right now it just feels a few seconds shorter than you'd really want for this ability to be completely worth its investment in energy. Besides that, we have Seeker Volley. As many people probably know that have used it, it is, once it's absolutely full, max out, upgraded, really, really good on Earth. It is terrible, absolutely dreadful in the Void, and it remains that way. It's pretty much exactly the same. It does slightly more damage because the health of all of the fighters and stuff has been reduced, but not to a considerable enough thing where this can actually wipe out fighters. This ability is going to need some significant damage increases. Maybe the damage increases could be backloaded so that it's not like destroying on Earth unless you have it fully upgraded. But yeah, this ability is still not going to be used, I think, because it just doesn't do enough damage. Just plain and simple does not do enough damage. Particle Ram. Particle Ram, from the listed changes, seemed like it was going to be a dead ability, but the changes as listed in text were not really as clear cut as it seemed. So you turn this on, and whenever you're moving forward, it's active, as you'd expect of a ram, and whenever you stop moving, it doesn't turn the ability off, it just stops dealing damage and fades out. The moment you start moving again, it turns back on. So this ability is still totally fine. It doesn't do any meaningful damage to enemies, but the main thing that this was being used for previously was just breaking rocks in space so that we could farm different resources and things, and it still very much does that. I would like to see the damage of this ability go up so that it can be at least somewhat viable for destroying things in the Veil once it's fully upgraded. But as it stands right now, at the very least, it's going to still retain its current function as a thing you use for gathering resources. Moving on, let's talk more in depth about avionics. So there's been a vast simplification of the avionics system in general. This means that we are not going to have multiple houses for all of the different things. So you're not going to have like a hyperstrict that only goes up to a certain percent and a different one that goes to a higher percent at a higher drain. They've simply cut all of those out except for the starter ones that you get whenever you build your Railjack. Those are like basic avionics now or what have you. All the ones that drop are now like the full power avionics. You get them to max level and you have a very consistent, this is the thing. If you have the Serration equivalent Hyperstrike, it is the one Hyperstrike. And if you max it out, you have the best Hyperstrike. And that's really good. I think the simplification on this is going to just absolutely clear up a ton of confusion just about like the avionics system in general, and it's going to be great for it overall. Also, I don't 100% know this next part is absolutely going to live, but obviously that's the case with all of these changes. But the conversion stuff, if you had, like, say, one of the crit ones and it wasn't the good crit one, those are going to be converted into their retained version. So if you didn't have a Zetki bulkhead, but you had like a Levon bulkhead, that is going to be converted into the now just the one bulkhead that remains. So you won't have to worry about like refarming a bunch of things and losing a bunch of the things you already have, because that stuff is going to get converted over. Near as I can tell, that's how it works on the PTS at current, and I think that's a great way to move forward for DE so that nobody loses anything. However, there is a considerable issue with capacity. So I have a maxed out reactor, or very nearly maxed out. It's 96 of the 100 possible capacity that you can get. With that, you cannot fill all of your slots. You just can't. You're going to put in all of your damage stuff and your survival stuff, and after that, you are done. You can fit your 3 abilities. There's no room for tacticals, and you don't even have room for one of your passive avionics from building all that stuff out. So I think there probably needs to be a change to how much capacity you can get. Like, there needs to be a reactor increase, because the maxed out number on a reactor really probably should allow you to fill all your slots up, because that's just the way of things. Like, if you have the highest, most powerful reactor, you probably should be able to fill your slots in one way or another with your avionics. So that's going to be kind of an issue. Honestly, not a major one. I don't think most of the tacticals are very good anyhow, but that was an issue that I noticed going through these changes. So, Railjack speed stuff. So, in general, I think the Railjack speed feels better overall. Doubling the base speed of the Railjack itself is definitely a boost. And it feels nice to just do the regular old WASD moving around. But boosting, having that huge decline, means that just regular boosting is kind of worthless. It's a very, very, very tiny speed increase that's going to be not worth doing most of the time. However, slide boosting appears to be still very good for getting around and felt nice to do. So I think something probably needs to happen with just regular boosting to bring it up to a level where you'd ever want to do it. Also, on top of that, I think with the increased drain on boosting so that you boost for less time, I think there needs to be an offset with that, with like a multiplication to the regen of your boost meter, maybe like a 3x multiplier on how fast that stuff comes back. Because you should be able to, I think, do it more often than you can at current, because obviously it lasts considerably less time now. So that stuff overall, I feel pretty good about the direction of the Railjack changes. They're maybe just not exactly where I would put them. So moving on, let's talk about some intrinsic stuff. So obviously overall, they doubled the gains on intrinsics just as like a conversion from affinity to intrinsics. And that is a fantastic first step. It is much better than it was because obviously it was doubled. Doing some testing in the much later missions in the Veil, without a booster, it seemed like you're going to be getting like roughly 7 to 12 intrinsics per mission. And with a booster, obviously it is doubled on that. I do think that this is not quite enough intrinsics to be getting in the Veil. I do think they're like plus 50% boost to amount of intrinsics that you're receiving, but it is way, way closer to, I think, what it should be than it was before. So that is obviously a positive change. Hopefully that boost just gets a little bit higher than it is now, and I think it would be in a pretty good spot. Let's talk about valence transferring. So valence transferring, the gigantic negative here is that you have to repair gear in order to fuse it in to your current gear. So if you have like a Zetki APOC guns, you need to fully repair another Zetki APOC guns in order to fuse it in to that current one that you have. This, of course, it gives you the gigantic repair cost, and I think that is a mistake where it stands now. However, I don't think the cost needs to be lowered that much. Upon going in and like doing the fusion myself, it only took me 3 total weapons in order to get a weapon fully maxed out in its bonus. And because it only took 3, I think it would be somewhat reasonable if you just had to pay 50% of the build costs whenever you go to fuse a piece of wreckage into the actual weapon you've already built. So the process would be that you would build the weapon, and then you would use it as normal. And then whenever you would go to fuse, you would take the wreckage and go to fuse it in. And whenever you go to do that, you pay half of the build cost of that. So in totality, for what I would have had to have done, it would be build the full thing for its full cost, and then fuse in 2 weapons for an additional full cost to get the best version of that weapon. I think that would be a pretty fair system. But as of right now, I think the cost is considerably too high because you're paying 3 weapons worth of materials to get the best version of a weapon, as opposed to 2 weapons worth, which feels a lot more reasonable to me. Obviously, it being a less of a build cost than even that, I think would also be reasonable, but that's kind of where I am right now in terms of the valence transferring. Moving on, let's talk about arc wings. So arc melee, plain and simple, it still feels really useless and super clunky, and it does not do a ton of damage. The only time you're really going to be getting kills on fighters is if you hit melee and you end up in front of them and they run into you and kill themselves by running into you. That's kind of the max of where arc melee could be useful at all. It's really unfortunate as it stands right now. Hopefully a lot more tweaks come to this, and also a lot of damage buffs, because it felt very, very weak. Arc guns, on the other hand, completely opposite of that, there's been a very large changeover from like the heavy status sort of meta we were in for the arc guns in Railjack over to like massive amounts of crit being what you'd want to build for. The Imperator Vandal and the Velocitus performed actually quite well against enemies. But as an overall statement on kind of arc wings in general, or arc guns in general, I think they still need a bit of a boost, maybe like 30 to 50% more damage across the board. And the weapons that are very status heavy, I think need even a further boost beyond that so that they can sort of more compete with the crit weapons as it seemed to stand right now. Anyway, though, my overall impressions of this are that it seems to be positive changes on the whole. I'm hoping to see, of course, some further changes, just a slight more of a power increase on top of the things that we've seen already. Hopefully we get there. And hopefully these changes, whenever they go live, are stellar and help people actually care about Railjack. That'd be very nice, I think. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed the B-roll and such on the side of this video while we've been talking about these changes. That is footage from the PTS directly, so of course it is all dev stuff if you're seeing anything weird on it, because it's like in development stuff and there's going to be maybe more bugs than usual on the PTS, which is to be expected. Anyway, though, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you tomorrow.